The letter felt heavier than paper should. Jake turned it over in his hands, the HOA's official seal stamped at the top like a royal decree. His stomach twisted as he read. Asterisk, all Halloween decorations are strictly prohibited per HOA Regulation 17B. Any violations will result in fines and potential legal action. Failure to comply will not be tolerated. Asterisk. The crisp autumn air carried the distant laughter of children, the scent of cinnamon and burning wood from a neighbor's chimney. It should have been the perfect evening, the start of his favorite season. But as he stood on his porch, letter crumpled in his grip, the joy of Halloween slipped away like mist in the cold. His neighbors had warned him about Karen. Karen Monroe, HOA president, self-appointed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics. She had lived on Maplewood Lane for over a decade, and in that time she had cultivated a reputation as a tyrant. She roamed the streets like a queen surveying her domain, clipboard always in hand, lips always pursed. She didn't enforce the rules, she was the rules. Jake exhaled sharply and looked around. His house was ordinary, a two-story colonial with a well-kept lawn and a driveway that needed repaving. But every October it became something else. He had inherited his love for Halloween from his grandfather, who had built elaborate haunted house displays every year. It was tradition. It was sacred. And now Karen wanted to kill it. The sound of heels clicking against pavement made him look up. There she was, approaching with the sharp efficiency of a drill sergeant. She wore a beige sweater, pressed slacks, and an expression that could curdle milk. Her eyes flicked to the letter in his hands and a slow, satisfied smirk curved her lips. "I assume you've read it," she said, voice smooth but edged with condescension. Jake forced a smile. "I did. And I have to say, banning all Halloween decorations? That's a bit much, don't you think?" Karen tilted her head, mock sympathy in her eyes. "Oh, Jake. It's not personal. It's about standards. We run a clean, respectable neighborhood. Halloween? Well, let's just say it attracts the wrong kind of attention. Tacky inflatables, blinding strobe lights, screaming children. Not exactly the kind of ambience we strive for." He bit back a sharp reply. "Halloween is a tradition. Families look forward to it. My kids." Karen sighed, cutting him off with a dismissive wave. "I understand some people enjoy that sort of thing. But the board has spoken. No exceptions. Not even for you." Jake clenched his jaw. There was no vote. "You are the board." A flicker of amusement crossed her face. "Exactly. And trust me, the fines for non-compliance are substantial. I'd hate for you to find out the hard way." With that, she turned and strolled down the street, clipboard tucked under her arm like a scepter. Jake watched her go, anger simmering beneath his skin. He could hear his kids inside, already talking about costumes, excitedly planning their trick-or-treat route. How was he supposed to tell them that Halloween wasn't happening this year? That some power-hungry woman had snatched it away because she thought skeletons and pumpkins were distasteful? From across the street, an elderly neighbor, Mr. Thompson, shook his head. "She got you too, huh?" Jake let out a hollow laugh. "Yeah, looks like it. She's been running this neighborhood like a dictatorship for years," Thompson muttered. "People used to fight back, but she finds ways to make their lives hell. Now most folks just give up." Giving up. The word sat heavy in Jake's chest. That was the worst part, not just losing but losing quietly. Letting Karen win without a fight. He looked down at the letter one last time, then crushed it in his fist. No, he wasn't giving up. Not this time. Jake sat in his dimly lit garage, staring at the flickering glow of a jack-o'-lantern video on his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen as he scrolled past extravagant Halloween displays from other neighborhoods. Houses covered in cobwebs, animatronic ghouls lurching at unsuspecting guests, yards transformed into horror movie sets. It wasn't fair. Every other street in town would be celebrating, while Maplewood Lane sat in eerie silence under Karen's dictatorship. His fists clenched. No decorations? Fine. But she never said anything about events. The idea hit him like a lightning bolt. If he couldn't decorate his front yard, he'd go bigger. Bolder. Something Karen would never see coming. A haunted house. Not just any haunted house, the biggest one the neighborhood had ever seen. Excitement crackled in his veins as the plan formed in his mind. His backyard was spacious, enclosed by a tall wooden fence. Plenty of room to create something incredible. And if Karen had a problem with it? She couldn't do a damn thing. It was his property. By morning he had a blueprint. The first step was getting help. He needed builders, designers, actors. People who had just as much reason to despise Karen as he did. Luckily there were plenty. His first stop was the Thompsons' house across the street. The old man opened the door, raising an eyebrow at Jake's expression. "I need backup," Jake said. Thompson grinned. "You finally planning to take her down?" Jake nodded. "But I need people. You in?" Thompson's smile widened. "Hell yes. And I know just the folks to call." Word spread fast. By the end of the day, Jake's living room was packed with neighbors. Some had fallen victim to Karen's absurd rules: fined for leaving Christmas lights up too long, penalized for planting flowers that weren't HOA approved. Others were just tired of her reign of terror. Jake laid out his plan. "We're building a haunted house in my backyard. Full-scale, professional level. Animatronics, actors, fog machines, the works. If she wants to control what we do out front, fine. But this? She can't touch it." A murmur of excitement rippled through the group. Lisa, a local theater director, leaned forward. "I can get actors. I know plenty of people who'd love to play monsters." Ethan, a high school tech whiz, smirked. "I can rig special effects, make it look like ghosts are flying around." Sarah, who ran a bakery, grinned. "I'll bring refreshments. If we're doing this, we're making it huge." Plans were made. Assignments handed out. They had 2 weeks to pull it off, and everyone was all in. The real challenge began when the supplies started arriving. Gigantic boxes of fake tombstones, animatronic zombies, and massive black tarps cluttered Jake's garage. Every night, they worked under the cover of darkness, hammering, painting, wiring effects. The backyard transformed into a nightmare. A towering archway marked the entrance, draped in decayed fabric. Inside, a winding path led guests through a maze of horrors: animatronic skeletons rattling in cages, a fog-filled graveyard, shadowy figures lurking in corners. A mock execution scene, complete with a guillotine, stood near the back. Lisa's actors rehearsed their roles with unnerving commitment. One dressed as a demented scarecrow, another as a ghostly bride who wailed from the shadows. A towering figure in a plague doctor mask practiced standing perfectly still before lunging at unsuspecting guests. Despite the secrecy, Karen had started sniffing around. Jake caught her prowling near his driveway one afternoon, eyes narrowed as she surveyed the growing piles of materials. She couldn't see the haunted house, his fence was too high, but she sensed something was happening. She crossed her arms. "You seem busy, Jake." He forced a casual smile. "Just a few home improvements." Her lips pursed. "You wouldn't be breaking any rules, would you?" "No rules against backyard projects." Karen lingered for a moment before huffing and walking away. But Jake saw it, the flicker of frustration in her eyes. She hated not knowing what he was up to. That only made him work harder. As the final week approached, anticipation buzzed through the neighborhood. Flyers appeared on community boards. Cryptic social media posts teased the scariest experience of the year: one night only. Even local businesses began donating decorations and prizes. Karen was losing control, and she knew it. The night before Halloween, the haunted house was complete. Jake stood in the backyard, surveying their work. The fog machines hissed, filling the air with swirling mist. Strobe lights flickered through the gaps in the walls. The actors stood in costume, their eerie silhouettes casting long shadows. It was perfect. Tomorrow night, Karen would see exactly what she had unleashed. Halloween night arrived with an electric chill in the air. The streets of Maplewood Lane, usually dead silent under Karen's rule, buzzed with an excitement that hadn't been felt in years. Groups of children in costumes scurried from house to house, their laughter echoing under the glow of porch lights. But the true spectacle, the event everyone whispered about, was happening in Jake's backyard. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the gates to his haunted house creaked open. A thick fog slithered along the ground, swallowing the pathway leading inside. The entrance loomed, black fabric fluttering like decayed flesh in the evening breeze. A single flickering lantern illuminated a sign painted in jagged red letters: "Enter if you dare." They came in droves. Parents, teenagers, thrill seekers. Some arrived out of curiosity, others simply to defy Karen's grip on the neighborhood. The line stretched down the sidewalk, murmurs of anticipation rippling through the crowd. Jake stood near the entrance, a satisfied smirk on his lips as he watched people shiver before stepping inside. And then, just as expected, Karen arrived. She marched up the driveway, heels stabbing the pavement, face twisted in fury. A small posse of HOA loyalists trailed behind her, their expressions a mix of outrage and fear. Jake met her glare with an easy smile. "Something wrong, Karen?" he asked, folding his arms. "This," she hissed, waving a hand toward the haunted house. "This mockery of a community event is in direct violation of HOA policies. I will not allow it. Jake shrugged. There are no regulations against private gatherings on personal property. No decorations in the front yard, sure. But this. He gestured toward the backyard with a lazy sweep of his arm. This is perfectly legal. Karen's eyes narrowed. You're disturbing the peace. The whole neighborhood is here, he shot back. Seems like they enjoy being disturbed. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Karen's face darkened. I'll have this shut down, she snapped. I'll call the authorities. Jake pulled out his phone and grinned. Already did. Fire marshal approved. No violations. Karen faltered, her carefully crafted threats crumbling in the face of preparation. The satisfaction in Jake's chest was nearly euphoric. Then, as if fate itself had a sense of humor, the haunted house screamed. A piercing, bone-chilling wail erupted from inside, followed by a blood-curdling shriek. People in line jumped. A few kids clutched their parents. Even Karen's minions flinched. The haunted house had come alive. Jake turned, suppressing a smirk as Lisa's actors began their masterpiece. From the shadows, figures slithered and lunged. A plague doctor loomed in the fog, his beaked mask catching the dim light. A skeletal ghoul rattled its chains, moaning in agony. A twisted clown burst from behind a tattered curtain, its laughter jagged as broken glass. The crowd gasped then cheered. Karen recoiled. This is grotesque. Jake chuckled. It's Halloween. Karen's lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Her eyes darted toward the entrance, toward the sea of eager faces waiting to step inside. She was losing. She knew she was losing. Then, in a desperate move, she turned to the crowd. This is a disgrace to our neighborhood. You shouldn't support this filth. It's an embarrassment. Silence. Then, from the back of the line, old Mr. Thompson cupped his hands around his mouth. Lighten up, Karen. You're terrifying the kids more than the haunted house. Laughter erupted. Someone clapped. A kid dressed as a vampire stuck out his tongue. Karen's face burned red. Jake leaned in just enough for her to hear. Happy Halloween, Karen. She turned on her heel and stormed away, defeated. The crowd cheered as the next group disappeared inside the haunted house. The night had just begun and Karen? Karen had lost. The night pulsed with an energy that had never existed on Maplewood Lane before. The haunted house had taken on a life of its own, drawing in visitors like moths to a flickering candle. Jake could hear the delighted shrieks of terrified guests, the guttural growls of hidden actors, the mechanical hiss of fog machines cloaking everything in ghostly mist. It was perfect. But Karen wasn't done. From his vantage point near the entrance, Jake caught a glimpse of her pacing at the end of the street, phone clutched in her white-knuckled grip. Even in the dim streetlights, he could see her face twisted in barely contained rage. She was calling someone, probably grasping at any authority figure who would listen. But Jake had played this game too well. He had covered every legal loophole, followed every rule, and she had nowhere left to turn. Unless... Jake's eyes narrowed as she turned sharply and disappeared around the corner. A strange unease crept up his spine. Karen wasn't the type to walk away unless she had a plan. And then, bang, a sharp, metallic clang echoed through the backyard, followed by the unmistakable sound of something snapping. A high-pitched whir shot through the air, and suddenly one of the large overhead tarps came loose, slapping violently in the wind. Several people gasped as a section of the haunted house groaned under the sudden shift, its wooden frame creaking ominously. Jake's stomach dropped. Karen. She must have cut something, tampered with the setup when no one was looking. He tore through the crowd, pushing past confused guests and slipping behind the haunted house, where shadows stretched long and deep. His breath came in sharp bursts as he scanned the darkness. Then he saw her. Karen was crouched near one of the main support beams, a wicked-looking box cutter glinting in her hand. She had slashed through a thick rope, and another tarp sagged dangerously above them, straining under its own weight. Jake surged forward. What the hell are you doing? Karen jolted but didn't look guilty, she looked satisfied. I'm fixing your little disaster before it ruins this neighborhood. By destroying it? He barely contained the fury in his voice. Karen straightened, smoothing her blouse as if she hadn't just committed outright sabotage. This monstrosity is a liability. Someone needed to take action before a child got hurt. Consider this my civic duty. Jake took a slow step forward. You're unbelievable. She smiled coldly. And you're finished. A loud snap cut through the night. One of the weakened wooden beams groaned, then split with a violent crack. The structure lurched. Screams erupted from inside as shadows twisted wildly under the strobing lights. Jake didn't think, he moved. He lunged forward, grabbing Karen's wrist just as she took another swipe at the support ropes. The box cutter clattered to the ground as she gasped in outrage. "Let go of me," she shrieked, twisting in his grip. "Are you insane?" he shot back, dragging her away from the collapsing section. "You could have actually hurt someone," she thrashed, but Jake was stronger. He hauled her back just as another beam groaned under the strain. The structure wouldn't last much longer. A sharp whistle rang through the air. Jake. Lisa, still in her eerie ghost bride costume, rushed toward him, her face pale under the smeared white makeup. "We have to clear people out now." Jake didn't hesitate. He spun Karen toward her HOA minions, who stood frozen at the gate, horror plastered across their faces. Get her out of here, he barked. They hesitated. Karen had ruled over them for so long, but the sheer fury in Jake's voice left no room for debate. One of them, an older woman who had clearly had enough of Karen's antics, grabbed her by the arm and hauled her away. Jake turned back to Lisa. "Get the actors. We're shutting it down." They moved fast. Within minutes, the actors stepped out of their hiding places, masks removed, voices calm and firm as they ushered guests toward the exit. Parents grabbed their children, teenagers groaned in disappointment, but no one panicked. And then, crack. The weakened structure gave way, sending a section of the haunted house toppling in on itself. Dust and fabric billowed into the night like smoke from a funeral pyre. But the space had been cleared. No one was hurt. Jake exhaled, his entire body trembling with adrenaline. The guests lingered, murmuring among themselves. Then, to his utter disbelief, applause broke out. First from Thompson, then Lisa, then nearly everyone in the crowd. They weren't just applauding the haunted house. They were applauding him. Applauding what they had built. Applauding the fact that, for the first time in years, they had fought back. Karen stood on the sidewalk, livid, humiliated, powerless. The police arrived not long after. Someone had called them when the structure started to collapse. But as they took statements, it quickly became clear who the real culprit was. Witnesses stepped forward. People had seen Karen sneaking around the back before the accident. And when the officer turned to her, expression impassive, and said, "Ma'am, we need to have a conversation about property damage and reckless endangerment," Jake saw it, real fear flashing across her face. Karma had arrived. The neighborhood buzzed for weeks afterward. The haunted house became legend. Karen, on the other hand, wasn't seen much after that. The HOA held an emergency meeting. Turns out, her iron grip on the neighborhood had been more fragile than she thought. A few well-timed petitions and an overwhelming vote later, Karen Monroe was officially removed as HOA president. Jake stood on his porch the following week, watching as she packed up a moving truck, her face set in stony silence. Mr. Thompson strolled over, hands in his pockets. "Never thought I'd see the day." Jake grinned. "Happy early Christmas to us." Karen shot them one last glare before climbing into her car and driving away, her reign of terror nothing but a bad memory. Jake turned to Thompson. "Next year we go bigger." The old man chuckled. "Damn right we do."